Welcome back, everybody. This is Edwin, the Magic Engineer, and I just wanted to make a quick video kind of in response to some of the questions I got based on my last video, which is really just like not so much a magic, but it's a finance video, and I'll link it right here. I just put it out a couple days ago, and I'm loving the response it's getting, by the way, because I really like doing videos about finance, and I haven't done a lot of those for like a while, and I've just been focusing on like magic and other topics. So thank you guys for checking that one out. But this one is about magic because as everybody knows, or at least everyone's talking about, there is like a decent chance that we're heading into a long overdue recession that, you know, who knows how deep it's going to go. People have their various opinions on how deep it's going to go. I don't want to go into like how big I think the crash is going to be right now. What I want to cover is how do I think Magic the Gathering is going to react to a deep recession if it does go deep. So for the comments that I'm giving right now, the way that I want you to perceive these comments is basically the deeper the recession or the pullback, however you want to phrase it, goes, the more these effects I'm going to describe I expect to actually happen. So with that, I don't think it's a simple answer. Like if somebody says, Edwin, do you think Magic the Gathering is going to drop if we have a recession? It's a yes and a no. And you have to put qualifiers inside there. And also let me also put another like qualifier around this whole thing. When I gave my finance video, and I really want people to go look at that last one that I just did, that was based on a lot of factual information. I showed charts. I went through math. I showed a lot of analogies. It's much more fact-based. I don't have all this like enormous amounts of data to stand on for this actual one. There's a lot more just opinion on this one. And when I give an opinion that's kind of based on experience, I want to call that out. And it's not so much that I want to discredit my opinions. It's more that when I'm giving facts and I'm giving like logical analogies and critical thought, I want to elevate those like above this space of opinion, basically, right? So anyways, back to this. Okay, so my opinion on what's going to happen is I think that there's going to be a very different reaction with the very high-end cards of Magic the Gathering, the most expensive, rarest stuff, and the middle ground, and then the lowest tier. I think the market will react to those differently. And I think it comes down to supply and demand, and it comes down to the strength of the people holding those individual assets. So you also understand supply and demand. I'll talk about that in a second. I first want to cover the strength of the holders. Now, in financial world, that's described as strong hands versus weak hands, right? And the best way to describe a strong hands investor, just in any asset class, is a strong hands investor are the people that are not going to get washed out in the middle of like the depths of a recession. They're not going to get fired from their job. They have large amounts of disposable wealth, and sometimes if they're invested right, they might lose money during a crash. They might not, but the important thing is not whether or not they lose money. The important thing is, do they have to sell during a crash? That's the important part. Because if you think about a crash, it's two things simultaneously. It is very painful. You lose an awful lot of value. So that's the negative side that washes out a lot of people, but it's also a buying opportunity. If you're the guy who's sitting on a large pile of just cash, not assets, because you know your assets all probably went down. If you're sitting on cash, if you're liquid, right? And then everything else around you goes on sale, well, it's like, you know, Blue Light Special at Kmart, basically, right? Hey, like everything just went on sale. You can go buy stocks at a discount. You can go buy real estate at a discount, go buy artwork at a discount. So, and I touch on that subject in a lot of my other videos, especially when I like refer back to America's Great Depression in the 1930s. It was basically like a big fire sale. If people that had no debt and they had cash, they could just go capitalize on it. The debt thing's important. You gotta consider that, because like, even if you have like, you know, lots of cash on hand, if you have a large amount of debt, your debt is going to eat away at your cash position really fast. Because what often happens is your income stream goes away in a recession. Like either you lose your job or or your boss just says they're going to pay you less. Things happen, right? And so you lose that income stream, and maybe you saved up a big emergency fund, but then it's like your mortgage payment keeps going, right? Your credit card payment keeps going. Your car payment keeps going. And so instead of income covering those, now your cash starts covering those, and your cash position goes down every single month, right? So even though you saved up a big cash position, you're in the middle of a crash and you can't use your money to go buy all these cheap things. You can't go buy stocks. You can't go buy magic cards. You can't go buy more real estate because your debt is too large, right? So it's two things. Being a strong hands investor means your debt is not going to crush you, and you have a large cash position that you before the crash that you can actually sell. Those two things, right? So when you look at those kinds of people, the strong hands investors of magic, what I personally see is it's largely people that were already financially successful. They already have maybe a job that's not going to be impacted by the recession, but they also like had almost no debt. You know, they weren't sitting there paying a car payment. They're not sitting there paying off their school loans, right? They're not going to get crushed by debt, and they have a large amount of like cash already, and they've been in buying these bigger magic cards, right? And when I say that, like, let's be even more specific. The people that are out there buying BGS 10 Black Lotuses, or like sets of unlimited or graded beta, things like that, like, you know, high-end stuff that's like the mint cards, right? Not the LP stuff, the high-end graded stuff. Those people that have been buying those were probably buying it using money that wasn't borrowed money. They're not making a debt payment on it. They don't have to sell. And so just think about that for a second. If you spent $200,000 buying a high graded Black Lotus, and then the market tanks and it goes down to 100 grand, if you think it's gonna go back up in value and nothing in your life is making you have to sell, you're not going to, right? And it's a very small amount of those cards in that very highest end. So I absolutely, it's my opinion, I don't think you're going to see a large drop in the highest end magic cards. There is going to be, of course, some that come into the market and they're going to get snapped up immediately. What I think more likely is going to happen is if you go into like a deep recession or a pullback, I don't think you're going to see them in the market. I think for the most part, all those BGS 9, 5, and 10 high grade, alpha, beta, unlimited, four horsemen, sets of old school, and then like, you know, the reserve list cards, they're not going to re-enter the market. They're just going to just like stay out, and it's like they never existed, right? Now here's what I think is going to enter the market. Let's talk about like that middle grade, right? There's an awful lot of like, say, revised dual lands. That's a perfect example. There's only a few thousand of those alpha, beta rares that were ever printed. And of those, you know, the ones that grade really high, it's a very small set, right? When you start going down that scale into like the LP and the played, like the heavy beat up versions, there's a lot more of them. And especially when you go to like a revised dual land, not only is there hundreds of thousands of these printed compared to only a few thousand, but there's an awful lot of them out there that are like pretty beat up, right? And so those ones, because they, number one, they cost less. Oh, sorry, my cat's trying to get on my lap. Because number one, they cost less. And number two, because there's so many more of them, I think that they're in the hands of the people that are the mid-range or the weaker buyers. I think there's an awful lot more people out there who have like, maybe they have a set of dual lands and they play in Legacy and EDH and stuff like that. But there's an awful lot of those guys that, like, you know, they're still paying off their school loan. They still have a credit card bill, right? Maybe they're, no, kitty, stay down. Their job gets like a little bit more risky, and they're not in a position where they have like a large enough cash position and low enough debt to ride out that storm of that recession. And so they get put in this really unfortunate position where they have to put these cards out and sell. How many people do you guys know where most of the wealth that they own is actually in their magic cards, right? It's not in like a 401k. It's not in like precious metals. It's not like in investment real estate that cash flows every month. It's like, it's in magic cards, right? And of those people that are in that category, how many of them in your mind do you think might get unfortunately shoved into a position where they have to sell in the middle of a recession that maybe even is worse than the 2008 Great Recession, like because this one it could be worse. There's whole different video. I'm not going to go into that here. There's reasons why this could actually be the worst pullback that the world has ever seen. It's possible, right? But even if it was just like worse than 2008, there's an awful lot of people that are going to be in a very bad position. And I can think of, hundreds of people that in my estimation that I even know that are in that kind of position that are going to have to sell those cards. And so that's already in a weaker hands position, right? The strong hands people, they don't have to sell anything, and they've got the absolute best stuff. At least the mid-range to weaker end is the people that have valuable stuff, but they're probably going to have to sell it. And I need to spend a little bit of time talking about what that looks like on the internet. Like, say that there's a card that was printed. I'm just going to make the numbers easy to help you guys understand the concept. Say there's a card that's printed that has maybe 1,000 copies, right? And let's say we go into a tumultuous time that's like scary. It's financially not very good, right? Even though there's 1,000 of that card that were made, say only 30 of them go into the actual market. You see them on eBay at like one time, right? Here's the problem. Even though that's a tiny fraction of the overall cards, there's 1,000 that exist, right? You've only got 30 on eBay. It's like 3%, right? That's nearly nothing in terms of the overall thing. So the majority of people are not selling in this fictional situation that I'm talking about, right? But 30 cards on eBay, well, that's an awful lot, right? If you have 30 cards sitting there on eBay, then unless you have 30 buyers there on eBay, then these numbers are not going to balance out. And the number of sellers is greater than the number of buyers, and therefore the market price starts to drop, right? I want to bring you guys back to this very clear concept. The free market is all about buyers versus sellers. Whichever one has a majority tells you the direction that the price is going to go if the sell is easy enough. Some markets don't work like that. Like real estate doesn't work like that necessarily, but it's because it's hard to sell real estate. It's hard to buy real estate, right? You can't just flip it like you can a stock. I can go on the stock market and the bid/ask price is very small. It's very liquid. I can just go click, click, and I can sell a stock just like that, right? But if I want to sell real estate, I got to have like an escrow service. I have to like file paperwork. I might have to hire a real estate agent. Most people would. Maybe pay them between 2 to 4% of the profit that I get on my home. I'm gonna have to give that to them, right? Like Magic cards, you could just like sell in person, something like that, or like a lot of your stocks, like maybe it's a $5 transfer fee, but for selling like 100 grand worth of stock, right? So the point is, the process is very difficult. So even though the buyers sellers thing is a real thing, the more ease of the transaction there is, the simpler it is to buy or to sell, the quicker those things actually react. Now, Magic cards can sell pretty quick. I mean, you can sell in person, you can go on eBay. There's lots of ways to get this across. There's Facebook groups where people sell cards. They're much more liquid than some of the other things. Not quite as liquid as like an electronic stock or Bitcoin or something, but it's pretty liquid, right? So what's likely to happen is on those 1,000 cards I was talking about, 30 go on the internet, right? Maybe you got 10 buyers, right? And so 30 people are all trying to sell to the same 10 buyers. And the 10 most desperate people of those 30 are going to define what that price is. And the way that all the price models work is like, I keep hitting that. And like with MTG Goldfish, TCG Trader, like all these different like price tracking tools, they're going to look at the most current market prices for transactions that are actually happening. So even though, 97% of the cards are not being sold, it's those 3% cards that are going to define that market price, and you're going to see it pulling back. And it's not even completely, that real, right? Because maybe it's like it's temporary. Like at some point, people are going to start buying and selling. The real market will enter again, right? This is only like, 30 of like the people that actually needed to sell, but they're going to define that market price. I want to be clear about that topic because that's something that exists, right? Like I saw this when Time Vault, when the Channel Fireball, no, sorry, not Channel Fireball, when the Atlantic and the Swedish rules changed and they unrestricted time vault, I expected there to be like more of like a price push like up, but then something happened that I didn't expect. An awful lot of people came flooding into the market to sell their time vaults, which, by the way, investment wise, they shouldn't have. They should have held them. All of those people selling those time vaults at that moment should have held. But there's this crazy concept of selling into strength, and there's times that's valid. That wasn't one of them. They should have held, finance wise speaking. But we're all glad that they did, because I was able to pick up some time vaults. Anyways, since these time vaults came into the market, the ratio of sellers versus buyers was leaning to the side for a while of sellers, and that actually like was offsetting that upward movement of the price of time vaults, and therefore the price didn't move very much. Now overall, I still think it's going to go up long term. I really do, because using multiple time vaults in the right deck is just amazing. And Twiddle Vault decks are fun, the Stasis decks are fun, and I haven't had much chance to show you guys a lot of those decks. I really want to play them, and I hope that rule changes for EC and Channel Fireball also. Side note. Anyways, point is that the availability in the current market of those certain cards makes a very big difference and makes a big price impact. And that will be seen by everyone else, and that will push it. So, okay, so I've talked about the high-end cards. I talked about like the middle grade cards. That's like the bulk. Cat, can you just hang on? No, she won't hang on. I've talked about the middle grade cards, and that's going to be the biggest place you see big price impacts that people really care about, because most of the money of Magic is in those middle grade cards like the dual lands, because there's just so many of them and they carry so much value. The market cap, if you will, of middle grade expensive cards is very large. When you go to like the bulk cards, like the lower end of the spectrum, they're already so cheap, right? They're going to still be cheap. It's hard to predict what I think is going to happen there. You might have people that look at it and say like, here's 6 boxes, huge boxes of cards, and I'm just going to get rid of them because I just don't care. You also might have a situation where people look at it and say, this shop is only going to give me, my cat's trying to exit it here. Hold on. She tried to close my program. No. Okay, it's still recording. You might have an effect where people look at it and say, this local LGS is trying to offer me $50 for all these boxes of cards. And it's just, it's just not worth it to me. I'd rather keep them because, like, if nothing else, I might pop them out on a rainy day and just have fun. Like, just no. So I think it'll go multiple directions. Overall, I suspect the lowest end cards that don't have a lot of value, some of them will get liquidated. You'll be able to buy some collections for almost nothing. Sure, that'll happen to some degree, but that one's harder to predict because the value you can sell them for is so low that a lot of people are just not going to be motivated to sell. So anyways, that's my perspective. That's how I personally am expecting Magic cards to react in a recession or a pullback if it actually happens. The highest end stuff is not going to move very much. It's going to go no sale. You're going to not even see them out there. The middle range stuff is going to drop in price. I expect, like, if we went into a crash, I think like Revised Dual Lands, Revised Demonic Tutor, very beat up Power 9 could drop a little bit because like they're in the hands of people that carry a lot of debt and couldn't afford the near mint stuff. So yeah, I think those could actually pull back in the middle of a recession. But like the alpha, the beta, the top end graded stuff, I don't think it's going to move hardly at all. So anyways, thanks for showing up, guys. I hope you have a great week, and I hope to meet a lot of you guys at GP Vegas. I'm really looking forward to this. So if you guys you watch my channel and you're at Vegas and you see me, please come say hi. That's literally like the reason I'm going, is to meet all of you and to hang out and play cards. So bye everybody.